Hey there, welcome back to Needed Conversations with Ryan and Victoria Cole. So glad that you tuned in today.
It's going to be a great episode. We are going to be talking about boundaries in marriage, but also boundaries as it relates to your extended family. If you're listening to this, the recording date is in December, and so a lot of people are thinking about the holidays and being around family, and that's when a lot of families' opinions start kind of creeping up. Everybody likes to express their opinion when they're full of food and, just sitting around. And so how to create those boundaries, or if you have toxic in-laws, and some of this thing isn't relegated to holidays. Some people are dealing with
This on a daily basis.
yes, and you got to learn to create boundaries. But before we jump into that conversation, we have a few other segments we're going to get to. And also, we want to encourage you to become a monthly partner with our ministry, Empowered Culture Ministries. We're so excited about what we are going to be unfolding over the next year, which includes a private group for married couples called the Intentional Marriage Group, which is going to include weekly devotionals, monthly date ideas, monthly group sessions, and all of that, which is a give back from our ministry for those who partner with us for any amount. So go to moremostforever.com right now to become a partner of any amount on a monthly basis and join that intentional marriage group. And hey, if you're not married, we've got other spiritual growth groups that you can jump in and be a part of as well. As a part of those community groups, you get access to the back end, where it's kind of like our own private social media area where you can have a profile and make posts and get courses and access to other amazing content. But we need your support to do that. So go and partner with us at moremostforever.com. And also, what is the biggest part about our vision that we're hoping to step into this year?
Well, we just put out a video out there. We waited to announce this for a while. I think some of the closest people knew that we were planning to do this, but we just put it out there that we are looking to buy land, and that's our ultimate goal, is to build a retreat center on some acreage. We're looking for like 20 plus acres. We would love to have tiny houses and host workshops and events for couples and families, and for pastors to come refreshed and renewed. We are going to have gardens on site. There's going to be a really good community for you to be plugged into and be enriched and empowered. I know marriages are under attack, and it's so important for us to have a community of believers that help us support along this journey. And this is why we're creating the Intentional Marriage Group community, to have you guys plug into what this ministry is doing. It's very easy to get distracted on social media, on Facebook or on Instagram. We are on all those platforms, but we want to support you specifically in this specific area, because we know that it affects every other area of our lives, whether it's parenting, whether it's dealing with relationships outside of your marriage, like in-laws, business partners, and then also your finances. All of it ties into marriage, and we want to be here to support you guys in that journey. So partner with us as we are on the journey to find this property. We're praying to do so by the end of next year and announce that and break ground. So we're raising some funds, because it's going to take a village for this vision to come to pass. And so all of this is going to be made possible by your generous donation. So you can do so by going to moremostforever.com and join us in accomplishing this great vision that God has put on our hearts to accomplish.
Yes, it's going to be exciting. Make sure you're following us on social media so you can watch all of this unfold. And of course, get your daily inspiration from those posts and reels at moremostforever on Facebook and Instagram. Let's jump into our first segment of the day, which is your marriage strategy of the week.
Yeah, the tip of the week that we have for you is to learn to forgive. And I know that can be very vague and, a broad statement, but I think what we're really wanting to address is to learn to forgive quickly. It's very easy, because you're living together, to get offended at little things, and it starts irking you. And it's very easy for us to bring that into the next conversation or the next conflict. So why this tip is important is for you to come head on and either sit down at the table and talk about certain things that constantly bother you, or maybe it's just a quirk that it's just it's irrelevant. It's not really that of a big deal. And maybe it's something that you need to address within yourself and say, why is it really bothering me? Does it need to bother me? Like, it's not really a big deal. So I think learning to forgive and not drag into the next conflict is really going to help you to communicate on a mature level whenever other conflicts and challenges arise, because you're just quick to forgive the little things that are kind of like menial. They don't really mean much.
Yeah, I think it's Billy Graham's wife who says that a good marriage is made up of two
Two
good
good forgivers,
forgivers.
yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about all of the little things is that there is a root issue in your heart if you have all of these little nitpicky things that are holding more weight than they should, right? If you're irritated about these little things, there's a strong indication that there's some underlying thing that you have not communicated with your spouse that you're upset about. And it's all pointing to something. We've counseled so many couples, and a lot of times the issue that one spouse brings forward, the other spouse interprets as, okay, let me fix this one individual thing. But there's something deeper that's being said behind every issue that is raised. It's
Mhm.
not about this one thing, whether it be the trash or the laundry or helping with the kids, or whether it be something that you said in passing. There's something else. Could it be that your spouse is saying, I don't feel heard? I don't
Mhm.
feel helped. I don't feel like you're present with us. It's not that those video games in and of themselves are a problem, but it's the effect of you being overly consumed with this particular activity and depriving your family. And so, as you forgive, you'll also understand that the key to forgiving quickly is being able to communicate maturely and not allowing these things to continue to foster within you and just bubble up over. And most people think when we say forgiving quickly means to brush it off. And
Yeah.
that's not what we're saying at all. We're actually saying to confront it. And
But do so in the right manner, because
yes,
oftentimes when we're irked by a certain thing, we have an outburst and we communicate it in a very ineffective way. It's a subliminal thing that we say to a spouse. So we think that we communicated that, but it probably flew over their head.
or we give a sarcastic comment and we
Yeah.
hope that they can
Got the
that's just
point.
passive
Yeah.
aggressive is what it is.
Yeah.
And when it comes to forgiveness, it's you have to be very intentional with how you communicate it according to Matthew chapter 18, right? You want to be in agreement. And so if you have an offense, bring it to them. And if your brother receives you, then praise the Lord. If they don't, then bring a witness. That might mean you need a mediator like Victoria and I. Now, when it comes to deeper issues of the heart that need to be addressed, when you talk about betrayal and offense, forgiveness is a little bit more layered than kind of we expect it to be. Most people think, let me forgive, I forgive you, and even saying it, it's done. But yet the emotions, the triggers, it still comes up within you. One of the things we taught at the marriage getaway about forgiveness is that there is a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation.
Mhm.
And when it comes to a lot of relationships, you can forgive and the relationship not have to be reconciled. You put a firm boundary, which is a wall between you and that other person, and say, I don't trust them with my heart. So I'm choosing uh, to separate myself in some capacity, whether that is a professional relationship or even a friendship that at one time you were close and now you have to put a firm boundary. And even with your parents, for some cases.
Mm.
But when it comes to marriage, there has to be reconciliation. That marriage cannot move forward unless there is forgiveness and then the next step, which is reconciliation. But before you can even get to reconciliation, you have to have an accounting for what needs to be forgived. Most of the time, when people let's just look at an extreme circumstance, you see one spouse cheated on the other, and so now forgiveness has to occur, trust has to be rebuilt, reconciliation has to occur. So that's this three phase, but within that there are layers to the process of forgiveness. You have to forgive multiple times over and over when the emotions arise. But one missing element that people don't think about is the calculation of what it cost the person who was offended. For instance, maybe they cheated on you. You have to sit and maybe even journal to say, okay, what did this betrayal cost me? Okay, it cost me in my emotions, in the way that I feel about myself, my self-esteem. It cost me in my relationship with my kids. It cost me because I feel overly anxious and what my spouse is doing and all the time. It costs me in all of these areas emotionally. In some instances, it could cost you to the degree of you couldn't perform on your job. You had so much stress, you lost your job. Literally listing out all of these things that will equate to a debt that your spouse owes you, that they need to repay and then some, right? When you are able to fully outline and visualize and sit with that and grieve it, and then make the conscious decision to take that paper, rip it up, burn it, scratch through it, make that prayer and say, I release them of this debt. I release them of this debt. I release them of this debt. And make those prayers very specific. You are setting yourself free on a deeper level. Because most of the time we say, well, okay, I forgive you. Let's move forward. And then ultimately something comes up in your emotions and you'll say, I thought you forgave me. Well, I didn't know I was going to feel that way about this. Well,
Mhm.
that's because you didn't count the cost of what the debt was. And so, if you are struggling with unforgiveness for your spouse, you said, I want to make this marriage work, but they betrayed me. They offended me in this deep way. They cheated on me. I've told them I've forgiven them. I've prayed for them. I've blessed them. What can I do more? I challenge you to take out a journal and make an account of all of the debts that were accrued because of what your spouse did to you. And one by one saying, I let them go. I release them. I bless them in Jesus' name. And you're going to have to do it over and over again until your heart softens towards your spouse. Because if you don't do this, even if you say you forgive them, your instinct is going to be to continue knocking at the door of their emotional or physical account to say, repay me, fill this hole in my soul. No, you've got to allow God, you've got to allow Jesus, the Holy Spirit, to fill that vacancy, that debt that was left behind because of what your spouse did to you.
Yeah, I remember listening to John Bevere and how he said that there was a person that really wronged him and God convicted him and told him to start praying for that person. He said it was excruciating, like the pain that I had to like go through, the betrayal that I've experienced, and this person was acting almost oblivious, like they didn't even like act like they cared that they hurt him, and God convicted him and he said that God told him to start praying for this particular person, and he said, "I prayed through gritted teeth." And, like, several weeks, I just prayed these prayers, and it felt very like, I don't know if I wanna bless this person. Do they deserve to be blessed? And he said, as I continued to be consistent in prayer and praying for that person, I genuinely my spirit, like, transitioned to where I no longer started paying attention to the transgression of this person, but I genuinely started blessing them.
Yeah.
And then God put on my heart to give them a very generous gift. And he was like, that was another thing that I'm like, "Really, God? Like, really?" Even though he already kinda went to a place where now I'm praying for this person, genuinely wanting them to be blessed. God instructed him to give this gift, and he said that opened a doorway that it would have never been opened, and now they have, like, the strongest of relationships. Because he talked about how in Second Corinthians, I believe this is scripture, that we are called to a ministry of reconciliation. And I think we're really quick, especially in our marriages, if our spouse wronged us, we're like, well, this gives me an okay to divorce them or not to trust
Mhm.
them ever again. But that's not how Jesus is. Like, if God was to turn the way that we are with people, quickly to discard or quickly to bring our wrongs, like, we would always be walking before a God that's a judge. It would never be like a loving father, a God that forgives, a God that has mercy and grace, and it says that once he forgives, he throws the sin, he no longer remembers that, and that's what he wants for us. And it's in the Second Corinthians 5:18. It says, "All this is from God who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation." And as hard as it is, whatever that you're going through, this is what God calls us to. So that means addressing your own personal feelings and saying, "Yes, I was wrong. Yes, this was painful." And, there's nothing wrong with feeling the emotions that you're feeling. But I think you have to start putting your hope and trust in God and allowing God to start putting his thumb on the places of hurt so he can bring healing to those places so that you can trust again, so that you can, truly love your spouse and not block yourself from experiencing what God wants us to experience because he forgave us all of our sin too.
Yes, I always wrestle with 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind. We can go through that whole thing and feel, okay, that's cool. I can vibe with that. And then it gets to love always trusts. And you're like, wait a minute. I've been told, that if I forgive someone, that doesn't mean I have to trust them or, and I think with the nuances of a relationship, trust is very relative. I think, would you trust them to drive your car again if they crashed it? I'm not sure. They would have to earn that trust back again. But when it comes to this kind of trust, I think it's giving them the benefit of the doubt in the sense of I'm going to look at them with the hope of the best. I'm going to hope the best for them and I'm going to believe the best in them instead of always considering the worst. It's not like you're whitewashing or glossing over kind of their flaws or even some of the evil behavior that you see, right? It's not living in denial or blindly walking, but it's saying I'm not choosing to meditate on that. I'm choosing to meditate on what I know is good inside of them. And obviously, boundaries are important, which is kind of like why we're moving into that conversation today. But I don't think that you can put healthy boundaries in place until you have forgiven. Because if you don't forgive, those boundaries are always, 100% of the time, going to be like the Great Wall of China. It's going to be, you never can access my heart again. And when it comes to marriage in particular, intimacy is built on trust and vulnerability. Like we've said before, intimacy is giving a person weapons that they will either use to fight for you or fight against you. And it's the risk that you take in that exchange of intimacy to say, this person could very well betray me, but I'm putting my trust in God to protect me either way, no matter if they do defend me or if they decide to turn against me. So we hope that gave you something to ponder on today. And we're going to move into a conversation on boundaries, just a little clip of a teaching we did last year on boundaries that we think we're going to help you. And then we're going to come right back after this. Most people, when they think of marriage, they don't necessarily think of boundaries, right? Because what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine.
Yeah.
But in order for there to be a healthy marriage, there has to be boundaries. You are two individuals that are becoming one flesh, but you have unique personalities, unique temperaments. And in order to thrive as a couple, you have to thrive as an individual. You have to understand your purpose. And you have to be pursuing that. Your spouse is a helpmate, a partner in that purpose journey. And boundaries help to create the banks so that there's a better flow of that energy and passion that you have to give to the world. It's like a pond that has no outlets, right? It's stagnant and still. It's the boundaries and the channels that cause those waters to flow to bigger streams. And so when you create healthy boundaries in the home, that extends outside of the home. When you respect boundaries in the home, you'll respect boundaries outside of the home. And I want to push the conversation a little bit further because I believe that when we talk about boundaries, oftentimes we are pointing the finger outwards. Mm-hmm. It's creating walls in order to keep people out or to teach people a lesson, or if we're honest, to control other people's behavior. because we feel as if they need to be controlled.
Oh, yeah.
And that's an indication of our own inability to discipline ourselves and create boundaries in our own lives. A lot of times we're asking people to acknowledge and to respect boundaries that we don't even respect ourselves. And so in order to enforce boundaries, I think the first thing you have to understand is that it's not about other people, and it's not about controlling the way that they treat you. It's about you, and it's about understanding the boundaries that you need in order to fulfill your God-given purpose.
Yeah, and I think somebody that would listen to it may say like, well, what if, somebody did me wrong? But I think it comes down to you personally reevaluating, did you give them ammunition to fight against you? Were they truly on your side? Did you truly identify what that relationship is? And like Ryan said, it really does point to you, and that's why it's so important to analyze yourself, not point the finger at somebody else. Yeah, people hurt people and do crazy things, but I think it's important for you to have certain boundaries with yourself in order for you to, when you go out externally and have other relationships, you're going to build those healthy boundaries with those people as well. And you're going to say, this is what's permissible, this is what's not, and actually be a man and a woman of your word and not just say it and then be loose about it.
Yeah, the fact is you're not going to be able to control everybody's behavior, right?
And it's liberating to know that.
Yes, absolutely. But you can control your responses. Even the way that we're teaching our kids, my son says, she's making me angry. And I said, no, she's not making you angry. You're choosing to be angry. And that's hard for a kid to understand because it's hard for an adult to understand.
Yeah.
You mean I'm in control of my own emotions? Yes. Right. And if you feel that a situation is, affecting you and you don't have control over how you're responding, you need to remove yourself from that situation. Now, we're not talking about, horrible offenses here. Obviously, when people harm you in a physical way or there's sexual abuse, that has to be dealt with at a criminal level. And that's a major boundary right there when you put somebody in prison for sure. And that those boundaries are built inside of our laws, right? You have liberties, but as long as your liberties don't infringe upon another person's liberties. That's sort of how it's supposed to run here in the United States of America. But when it comes to you personally, creating boundaries is about you recognizing what God has given you stewardship over and taking responsibility for that. And it's not to offend other people or to control their behavior. It's to give you the freedom and the liberty to do what God has called you to do without inhibitions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And really, you're trespassing against yourself whenever you don't set the boundaries and abide by them. And the moment that you allow those boundaries to be infringed upon, whether it's by you or by somebody else, is the moment that you're saying, this that God is giving me isn't valuable. Does that make sense? Like, think of the priceless works of art that we've hidden, behind these thick bulletproof glass windows or, behind these massive vaults, right? These boundaries, because what's inside is valuable. I'm not saying that you should keep everyone out, but it's certainly saying that you should respect the boundaries that you put in place as a proclamation of what you value. I hope you caught that. Boundaries are an indication to the world as to what you value and what you don't value.
I think, the issue is that in our society, we value someone else's opinion over anything else. Like, what are they going to say about us? I mean, we had a pastor come to our church, and he was talking about the story of this older man and his grandson and a donkey, and they were walking, and the grandfather put the young grandson ride on the donkey, and the people were passing by and saying, how shameful, shame on you. This young man is riding on the donkey while this old man is walking. So he said a ways away, they basically switched, and he sat on the donkey and the kid walked. Then the other people were saying, shame on you, you old man, letting this young man walk. You're the older person. You should be walking the donkey. And then he was like, well, okay, so we won't ride the donkey. Neither one of us will ride it. So they're just all walking. And somebody said, you guys are crazy. You have the donkey for a reason. Why is neither one of you sitting? And then he decides, okay, we'll both sit on the donkey. And then somebody said, you guys should be ashamed of yourself. You're putting so much strain on the donkey. And the moral of the story is you cannot appease people. And I think you have to recognize that other people's opinions shouldn't really matter to you. What should matter is being at peace with yourself and walking before God, not walking before men. And I think oftentimes we put so much emphasis on what somebody will say, what somebody's feelings will be about us, that, like Ryan said, we tend to compromise the boundaries that we set for ourselves. So we truly actually don't follow through with those boundaries because we're too afraid of what somebody will say about us, whether it's family, whether it's friends. But honestly, that puts you in a bondage, because then you're always obligated to somebody's opinion about your life and what you should be doing, instead of what is my purpose? What has God called me to fulfill? And I'm going to do it regardless whether people understand it or not, because I am not here to appease them. I'm here to do the will of God. That's how your mindset should be.
And think of it a little bit deeper as well. Like, why are you creating some of the boundaries that you're creating? Are you creating those boundaries because, it's what's healthy, or are you trying to punish someone, especially in marriage? Like, I think the silent treatment is one of the most toxic things you can do to your spouse. I know we all need our space, and we've talked about that, right?
Yeah.
Giving your spouse time to process. But, I've heard of spouses taking weeks or months and really excommunicating their spouse while living under the same roof. It's extremely toxic. And you could call that a boundary, or you could call that like you trying to punish another person for what you felt as if they did towards you, and not being adult enough to have the conversations where you create the proper boundaries in the relationship. Mm-hmm. And really, that's the crux of this episode today, helping you to understand that the boundaries that God is calling you to create have nothing to do with everyone else. They have everything to do with you, with your purpose and the calling He's placed upon your life. I wrote down a few things today. A person without boundaries hasn't taken personal responsibility for their life. They are being moved by the desires of those around them. So in fact, whenever you don't create boundaries, like I said before, you're telling the world, I don't value this dream or this career or this personal space enough to set a boundary and walk away. And a lot of us get angry for people encroaching upon those boundaries, but yet we violated those boundaries over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. When we don't set parameters in our day-to-day schedule that help us to accomplish those goals, to remove the distractions, to say no when no is necessary in order for us to say yes to the things that God is calling us to. We say yes to everyone. We allow ourselves to be distracted by technology, social media, and we're driven by these agendas in the world. Begin by creating boundaries in your life, by setting a daily agenda. When you wake up in the morning saying, this is what I'm going to accomplish today, and anything that doesn't fall within this list of priorities is going to have to wait till another day. I'm not allowing someone else to dictate my daily agenda. And I'm preaching to the choir because I'm guilty of doing this as well.
Yeah, and I would say the practical form of this, and this is something we teach couples, is, having a mission statement or writing a vision for your family. And that truly has liberated us, I think, the past 4 to 5 years, really to hone into what God has called us to do. I think that we needed the season of maybe, learning certain trades and being around people. But I think really writing out our vision really helped us to make the right decisions, even when good opportunities came about. And, we could have said yes to all of them, but we would have been exhausted. Listen, we all have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. And God has given you this time to be wise with that time. And it doesn't mean that there are times that you're not sacrificial in, doing the work of the Lord or helping somebody or stepping in. But what truly helped us was having this vision. And then for me, I have like a family calendar, and that really helps us to stay on track of what we need to accomplish as a family, things that we need to do. And then if, people come along the way, a week from now or 2 weeks, and they say, hey, are you able to do this? Well, let me check with my spouse. Let me check with my calendar. And it's not rude to say that. I think for you just to even have it visually, sometimes having it all in your head stresses you out even more. And then you'll say yes to something, and you're like, but I also planned this, but you didn't write it down. So you didn't remember that that's what you wanted to do, or maybe that's something you're trying to not do. So having that practical aspect add on to your daily life, maybe it's a family calendar, or maybe you have a plan or a list. Like I make a list on my phone. I literally go to Google Notes and I put Monday, and I just do a drop down bar. And as I accomplish those tasks, I just mark them off. That way I'm able to accomplish what it is that I needed to accomplish for that day.
Yes. There was a Facebook post that I thought was pretty interesting, that is kind of honing in on this concept of boundaries being about you and not other people. It was Olivia Viscero. It's
Vashero,
at the
something
Less
like that.
Stressed Lawyer, whether that's Instagram or Twitter. Nevertheless, giving credit where credit's due, but let's comment on this. She says, here are some examples of boundaries that aren't actual boundaries. This is an example of something that is not a boundary. Quote, you can't email me on the weekends. A proper boundary is, if you email me on the weekend, I will not respond until Monday. So you see that slight difference? It's you trying to control someone's behavior as if they're a child and they're going to listen to you and they're going to wait patiently until Monday. Well, they should just have the expectation that if you email me on the weekend, that you're not going to get a response until Monday.
And it sounds professional.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with it. I think the first one, even though it sounds very straightforward, like, hey, I'm not doing this. But at the same time, it sounds a little bit like, why are you emailing me?
But it's putting the responsibility of enforcing those boundaries on them instead of you.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't trust people enough to enforce your boundaries. So you can say, you're welcome to email me on the weekends. I'm just going to let you know I won't be responding until Monday. So that puts the responsibility of enforcing the boundary on you and not them. Another example is, quote, you can't talk to me like that.
Oh, that's a good one with family members.
Right. Or with marriages, right?
Yeah.
A proper boundary is, if you talk to me like that, I will hang up the phone. Right? So it's you enforcing what your response is going to be if they continue to make the decision to behave a certain way. This is another example, quote, you need to respect my time. This is, whether you put this in a different context, a lot of married couples go into this you need to conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a proper boundary would be, I will end the meeting at the scheduled time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of you need to respect my time. No, you need to respect your own time by making a declaration that I'm stepping away.
I think that from these statements that you've already said, that there's some kind of a time frame. And that's the thing that we've talked about in marriage too. If you set a boundary, or like you say something verbally, like you're not going to do this to me, to them, they may replicate it in a different way. You know what I'm saying? Like they can see something from a different perspective. So to them, they're like, oh, okay, maybe she's open to this, but then she may be close to this, or maybe she's open to this and then close to that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Another one is, you need to show up on time. The proper boundary would be, if you are late, we're not going to wait on you. and you enforce that. Churches are really horrible about this. Like, I'm not going to say what kind of churches. It's normally charismatic churches. It's like church is supposed to start at 10 a.m. and it's like 10:30 and we're just starting the first song. And, it's because we don't want to start unless there's, a
Enough
good
people,
crowd, right?
yeah.
But you're training people into dysfunctional behavior, right? No matter what,
We're starting
are starting
time.
on time.
Yeah.
7:00, if that's when we said service is starting, whether there's 2 people in the room or 2,000, we are getting started. And the next time people will know, I better show up so I don't miss what's happening. Bring that down to a smaller scale. Like literally, if we're meeting for dinner at 7:00 and they seat us and it's 7:45 and you're not sitting down with us, we've already ordered. If our food comes, you're gonna have to order your food later, and maybe you'll have to take it home if we decide that the meal is over with, right? We're not waiting around on you in order to eat. Those little things.
Yeah.
Another one would be, you need to give me less work. If you're talking about your boss, a proper boundary would be to say, I will not work more than 50 hours a week. And not only that, you state it up front, right? You understand what their expectations are, and then you also set your expectations and you come to an agreement. Most people complain about their jobs, but that's the job that you agreed to, right? You never set boundaries in the beginning. And, did you sign up for a 40-hour-a-week position? Or did you sign up for nights and weekends and now you're complaining about it because they don't pay you enough? Well, that's the pay that you accepted. Not a boundary. You need to do a better job. A proper boundary. If you don't make these 3 specific improvements by the end of the quarter, I will give you a negative review. Now, that's on the other end, like if you're a boss talking to an employer. This is what she goes on to say. Boundaries are not mandates for other people to follow. Boundaries are not demands. Boundaries are not expectations. Boundaries are not ultimatums. Boundaries are not idle threats. Boundaries is a particular course of action that you take to take care of yourself when a particular set of circumstances arises. That's it. It's about what you do. It's never about what they do, ever. And that is so good. And what do you have to say, honey?
Oh, I don't know, that thing that says that a boundary is not an expectation. That was kind of freeing. I always thought that, at least it's an expectation from you for other people, but it's because I know what my, I wouldn't say weakness is, but one thing that I do, I expect people to, I guess, perform the way I do, and I'm not tooting my horn, but I guess I have that expectation that if I'm going to do a certain job, I expect that person to do the same job. And I'm having to learn that it's not everybody else's like work ethic or priority, and it's hard for a person that's not that way. It's hard for you to recognize, like, there's people that are that's just not their gifting. They don't see that. They're not detail oriented. They don't think things through. And you have to accept that. So you can't have that expectation on anyone else but yourself.
And you can live this way without being rude or coming across as standoffish, because you're inviting the group of people into your life who have the capacity for the standards that you have set.
Yeah.
And not only that you have set, but that you adhere to yourself. You show up on time. So you expect everybody to show up on time. And not just you show up on time, you start on time. So when they walk in and they're creeping in the back, they're letting everybody else know what they prioritize or what they don't prioritize. And that's not on you or them. If you begin to bend to accommodate other people, then you're also sending a message that you don't prioritize the people who did show up on time. And so guess what? Those people are going to exit your life and you're going to be left with the people who showed up late. Now, that's just an example, but consider that in a multitude of categories, right? If you raise the bar, your relationships will shift. Either people will adjust to accommodate those standards, or they will exit your life and new people will come into your life.
And don't fret about it.
No.
Like you'll, I know it's not easy to come out of what you're comfortable with, but would you rather be comfortable and be in dysfunction, or have new experiences and have healthy relationships. It may be uncomfortable for a while, but you will really see and look back and say, wow, I actually feel like I have grown as a person because I have now stepped out of this and I am surrounded with people that call me higher. And that's the way it should be.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we hope you got a lot out of that teaching on boundaries. We have one more segment for the day. Let's talk about a question that someone asked.
Yeah, one of the questions is, how do we have healthy boundaries with family members, especially during the holidays? And I guess it's in reference to your marriage.
Yes. Well, I think that you have to go in with a game plan. That's number one. When you're going into a setting where you know family members are going to be there that typically cross the line, you're going to have to go in with a unified front with your spouse and say, we're not going to take the bait today. Please pull me out of this situation if you sense that I'm going down that path, right? And you go in with a unified front. And then ultimately, you know who you're going to be faced with. And if they choose to try and bait you, you have to refuse to take the bait. You can politely remove yourself from a conversation. You can, move to the other room. You can decide. I think Dr. Ramanath, I think is her name. Mm-hmm. She does this thing called bingo, right? And like, if there are 5 instances of boundaries being crossed and you remove yourself from the situation or you divert the conversation, then at that point, after those 5 little indiscretions, you probably need to make the decision and maybe have a little sign with you and your spouse that maybe we need to leave this gathering a bit earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, creating healthy boundaries, you have to be on the same page. And I think, like Ryan said, just talking before you attend that specific thing, like, what are my signs? Can we also plan to leave this space early? I mean, I know that we have to be with this family, but maybe there's a lot of tension that goes on, and we are going to come out of respect and going to come and eat with them and all that, but we're going to leave a lot sooner so we're not tangled in all of this mess. And just creating those safety nets, especially for like your spouse, like if they feel uncomfortable with your family, maybe like Ryan said, looking for those cues, maybe a body language, or maybe it's something that you guys do. I know sometimes Ryan and I like have this on the leg hand thing under the table, that kind of gives us a stopping point.
Sometimes it's not always like, sometimes it can be irritating if you want to stay and your spouse is like, I'm ready to go. But you ultimately have to bite your lip and say, I want to stay, I'm having fun, but because of my spouse, I would rather them be in a healthier place, because the fact is you're probably going to pay for it later in the relationship.
Yeah.
So if your spouse is feeling uncomfortable, just say, okay, well, it's time to go. Or, considering if it's extended family members, how you could build a tighter family unit and say, well, I'm not going to go there on Christmas Day, but what I am going to do is on the 23rd of Christmas or on Christmas Eve, I'm going to make sure that I stop by my mom's house and spend some time, give her a gift. I can't be around my aunts, but, I want to make sure that I still honor my mom and say, hey, I love you and I want to spend time with you, but I just can't, take the energy of that large group of people this year. And that's okay. Make those decisions that are going to be good for your mental health. But on the other end of things, don't allow people to intimidate you and push you away from the rest of your family, that you desperately need community. There's always going to be toxic people. Back when we were studying statistics of churches, one of the things that we saw was like 10% of every congregation is going to have crazy people.
Yeah.
And whether that be mental challenges or people who are narcissistic or just have an agenda or are demon possessed, right? We call them fruits, nuts. We call them holy granola, fruits, nuts, and flakes, right? There's always going to be 10%. And I think that that's probably true about all of our relationships. If you look at your family
too,
you
yeah.
got about 10% of them who are crazy, and you got to deal with the crazy in order to enjoy the 90%. But don't allow that 10% to control you, control your mind space, control what you do with your time. If you want to be somewhere, then you be somewhere, and you don't have to be baited in to any conversation that you don't want to participate in. Silence is a good weapon, right?
Just because you're silent don't mean that you're agreeing with them. You're just not taking the bait. Because a lot of these people, they want to have those debates and conversations, and they want to have an argument. So don't give them that pleasure, I guess.
And when somebody says something that is outlandish, I've heard a strategy where you could say, "Do you mind repeating that for me?" Or "What did you say?" Like that. Not in an angry way, but really like a, "What did you say?" And that little space of time plus them repeating it makes them look like the ridiculous one, which they are. And then saying, "Oh, okay." And then just moving on. So they're able to say that crazy remark twice so that they hear it, they feel the shame of it, and that other people around them recognize how toxic it was. But again, the best medicine is silence. Keeping your mouth shut, having conversations with people that you are getting along with. And then once you find common ground, even with people you may consider your enemy, stay on that common ground as long as you can. And choosing topics that are less controversial will help in that process. So we hope that answered your question. Make healthy choices this season, but don't allow toxic people to keep you from connecting with community, right? Don't allow the few people with loud voices to control you. You have more personal sovereignty than you think you do. So make healthy decisions. Make healthy decisions this holiday season. And also make sure you're following us on social media. If you have a question, you can always text us 864-428-7131 or DM us at Moremost Forever, Instagram and Facebook. Any final words, Victoria?
No, thank you guys for joining us for today's episode, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
All right.